Zion Williamson to the Knicks. It's a rumor that we've heard for years, and now we get some confirmation as Williamson is embarking on a breakup with his agency. We're going to get into what this all means and what it means for Zion's future with the Orleans Pelicans. But first, make sure you guys do subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications as well as we're pushing, can't believe it, 10,000 subscribers. We're pushing to 10,000 subscribers. Woo. Help us out. Hit that subscribe button. And Donnie Freeman, Donnie is here, but since this is a Zion Williamson topic, he is injured the way that he's doing this. He had a light go out on him. I think pretty representative of the way that NBA has dealt with an injury epidemic right now. Your equipment is slightly injured, but welcome in. At least we can hear you, Donnie.
Yeah, definitely. So I just wanted to say that I'm curious if you know who the character is on my image there, because it's a little bit after your time.
I do not. I do not. Who is it?
So that's Dark Magician from Yu-Gi-Oh! So that's something that a lot of the viewers will know, but it's definitely a little bit after your time, Trevor.
Yes, for sure. All of that would definitely be now if it was a character from like He-Man, if you had Skeletor up there, I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. If it was one of the Ninja Turtles, sure. Transformers, any of that. Yep. You want to throw Voltron up there? Let's go. Yeah, let's go. All right, let's see. So this is the latest on Zion Williamson. And this is via Chris Persianen of Clutch Points. Even before the 2019 draft lottery sealed Williamson's fate as the Pelicans pick, he made it clear to his agency, CAA, that he wants to play in New York. And he began his career in New Orleans, but he expected his agency to pursue a trade to New York. That was one of the two driving factors that resulted in his split from his agency. So we'll talk about the contract in just a second. Mm-hmm. But Donnie, there have been rumors, rumblings, and Zion's made some comments about it in years past, that he wants to be a Knick. Now we're finding out CAA, which kind of sort of runs the Knicks, like CAA and the Knicks, kind of like Clutch and the Lakers, similar situation. But now we're hearing like, no, this is so legit. Zion was expecting his agency to get him out of New Orleans and get him to the Knicks. And because they did not, that's part of the reasons why he is leaving CAA. That's pretty crazy. And to me, that doesn't suggest that Zion is all that interested in staying long-term in New Orleans.
Yeah, I think that may be the case. It's very interesting. I remember actually hearing something about that around the draft for Zion, that he was very interested in going to the Knicks. So that being said, I mean, that does make a lot of sense that was something he was trying to do and wanting to do. But unfortunately for him, I guess he wound up in New Orleans. And it's just kind of a weird situation because he's never been able to play for them truly because he's been injured off and on and just kind of a lot going on. But like you said, CAA, I don't know if we have a list of candidates, but it is very much like the Clutch thing where it's like their entire roster is CAA players, right?
Right. Yeah, that's really what it comes down to. Yeah, so CAA and the Knicks, Leon Rose, all that sort of stuff. But here's Zion. Here's his stats over the years. You look at this, he's played less than half of the possible games he could have played for the New Orleans Pelicans. Since he's been a Pelican, the availability is always a problem. When he's available, though, Donnie, his production is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, it's incredible. But with what's going on in New Orleans right now, how many injuries they've suffered, I do have to wonder if Zion, very clearly not wanting to necessarily be a Pelican long-term. Again, one of the reasons why he's firing his agency is because they didn't get him out of New Orleans and get him to New York. I do wonder if maybe now is the time for the Pelicans to tear this thing down truly. Well, and they wouldn't even have to do a full tear down, but maybe not just move Brandon Ingram by the trade deadline, which is what we're expecting, a Brandon Ingram trade, who is, by the way, also changing out his agency. Maybe something going on there. But could you move Zion as well and sort of restart the Pels?
Yeah, that may actually. I mean, we've talked about this very topic before. Even prior to the season starting, we talked about what Zion needed to do, how the Pelicans were going to be, their roster issues, having like basically only one real center on the team, things like that. And I do think that is an option. And last time we talked about it, I said, I would try to make that something that they do as a last resort, because at the end of the day, you do have issues with Zion. And I mean, if he just doesn't want to be there, that's one thing, right? So there's not much you can really do about that. But I think there's a lot of protection with the way that his contract is structured, and he is still an amazing talent when he's out there. It's just more or less getting him out there. And if he's willing to participate and play, which, I mean, he's not really shown that he's not willing. He's gone out there when he's available to do his job, for what I've seen. And at that point, I think he's still somebody you can build around. Like, he's still young. He's somebody that projects to be an all-star in this league still, or he used to be a superstar projection. I don't
if really he's know. On the floor.
If he's on the floor, yeah. So like, it's just a weird situation, because I don't know if they should do that. He's not the type of player that you give up on because he's so good, but he's never out there.
That's the problem. And that's where I'm wondering if this is the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? If Zion splitting with his agency because they didn't get him out of New Orleans, they didn't get him to the Knicks, is that enough for the Pelicans to say, okay, this guy really doesn't want to be here? Let's, and Zion may try to spin it and say, yes, I want to be a Knick, but I'm happy here too, or something like that. And that's probably what I'm doing if I'm him. But I wonder if this is enough for them to say, this isn't really where his heart is anyway. And his lack of availability is a problem for us. We bottom this thing out. We walk away from the draft with Cooper Flagg. We move Zion. We move Brandon Ingram. We get whatever future assets we can get, and we build this team around Cooper Flagg or whoever you get in this year's draft. DeJounte Murray, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Jordan Hawkins, Yves Missi, who's been good for them. That's not a bad place to be starting from either. That's not a totally unattractive path for New Orleans.
Yeah, you're right. That does sound pretty good when you lay it out like that. It's just still really hard to say you're going to give up on a talent like Zion because of the circumstance. And I do think that they probably have already known for quite some time that he would have preferred to have been, they probably have known since he was drafted, he would have preferred to have been in New York rather than where he was selected. So, I mean, I feel like they've probably already gone down that bridge with him, maybe even rectified that issue. But that doesn't sound bad. Like you said, if you could come off of Zion, if you could do something with BI, I mean, at the end of the day, you don't really have to do much. You don't want to let that salary slot go, but you can just let it go if you want to. Right. You don't really have to do much there. CJ is going to wind up being an expiring deal next year. I mean, the only guy that's long-term on your books really here is Trey Murphy and DeJounte. And those are two guys you can keep in, the short term throughout a rebuild,
You're happy with that.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
Yeah, Herb Jones as well. I mean, these are guys that you're happy to have on the roster at those prices. But this is the other bit of this in terms of why Zion would want to leave his agency. There's weight checkpoints. If you saw his contract, which I'll put back up in just a minute, there are guarantee dates where his contract is not fully guaranteed. The Pelicans were trying to protect themselves in case Zion just can never stay healthy. But since then, he's gained a greater understanding of how the contract was structured. Apparently, based on what this article is saying, Zion Williamson didn't fully understand what his contract was like, and the fact that there were guarantee ties, according to, now it's every player's responsibility to understand what they are signing, but he doesn't like that there's non-guaranteed portions of this and that he has to make a certain weight, has to be available for certain amounts of games. And with that added into the fact that he is still a New Orleans Pelican and not a New York Knick, this pushed Zion towards divorcing essentially his agency. So that's a factor too. And you have to wonder, and this is purely speculation on my part, but you have to wonder, does Zion feel any kind of way towards the Pelicans for putting all of that kind of stuff in his contract, which is not the norm for most superstars in the NBA? I mean, hell, Kevin Durant got a fully guaranteed max deal with a torn Achilles, knowing that he couldn't even play for a full season. He got a max deal. The Nets committed to paying him for a year to sit on the sidelines. So I wonder if there's any lingering resentment from that.
I mean, if he had no idea the way that this truly broke down, then yeah, I can completely understand that. And I would be mad at it too. I mean, like I said a second ago, they've got this contract, I mean, if you could pull up the terms for it, if you haven't already, I didn't see that, but this contract is crazy the way that they signed this, because if you remember prior to this extension, we were having some of the same talks about Zion, his inability to play and all that stuff. And so it completely favors the Pelicans to where Zion can basically become a higher paid player. He can get all this money. It's just basically not guaranteed. So it's very weird. But yeah, if that's the case, then I understand why he'd be upset personally. But like you said, it is also at the end of the day his responsibility to know what he's getting himself into.
Yeah, I mean, he's got these certain triggers in his contract. His weight has to be, he's got specific weight checkpoints throughout the season, and if he meets those checkpoints and if he's available for a certain amount of games, then he's able to make more money. More of his contract becomes guaranteed. So it's a very complex contract, and the Pelicans really went out of their way to try to protect themselves from the event that Zion simply cannot play NBA basketball. And I understand why they did it, but it also screams that they don't have a lot of faith that Zion's going to be out there on the floor. And again, they probably have good reason to. He's appeared in less than half of the Pelicans games during his time that he's been with the team. But with all of that added in, and the fact that the Pelicans have sort of accidentally tanked to start this season, I really am getting more and more on the side of maybe it's time. Maybe now is the time. You put Zion out there on the market. As soon as he recovers from his most recent hamstring injury, which we heard recently that he is nowhere close to returning. But whenever you can get him back out there, see what the market is like for him, move on from him, move on from BI. You don't totally wipe the slate clean, but see what you can do this year in the draft and then move forward with a new iteration of the Pelicans. I just think that may be the best way to go here for all parties involved, including Zion Williamson, maybe.
Yeah, that's possible that could be the best case. Maybe he goes somewhere else and is able to magically be healthy. I'm not sure. Maybe the Pelicans are cursed because, I mean, everyone on the team is hurt. Speaking of which, Murray is coming back, so that's kind of interesting too. But it seems like if I were thinking, about the Pelicans from their perspective, I understand what you're saying, but I think they'll probably try one last push this season to get their guys out there and see what they can do, especially with Murray coming back, and they're hoping to get healthy. And they've shown that they can be competitive without Zion because they haven't had him for half of his career at this point, so they know what to do, how to play without him. And I think that Murray can be a spark plug for that team. It's just really tough if that's your goal, to be competitive in the West, starting from where you're starting from, given that you've dropped so many games. And then again, in the West, it's really hard to be competitive. But I mean, I think that's probably what they try to do. But you have a compelling case if you're going to say maybe they should just try to bottom out. And basically, it's not even good. I think they're already halfway through a rebuild. Like, if you get a couple good young pieces in there, you could theoretically get back into like a play-in, playoff position pretty soon.
You could be right back in the mix very, very quickly, given the young guys that they've got. They've done a nice job amassing young talent. I think you can find ways to make it fit a bit better. But right now, the Pelicans are tied with the Utah Jazz for the worst record in the West. And there's a decent gap. I mean, there's a 3-game gap between the Pels and the Blazers. Yeah. Like, we're early enough to where this isn't insurmountable, but it is the West, and the West is not easy. They're going to have to rack up a lot of wins in order to get there. And I just wonder if maybe you don't just take this as a blessing in disguise and say, this is a chance to turn the page and get a really enticing draft prospect that can move us into a new era. It all depends on what teams are willing to give for Zion, of course, and what teams are willing to give for Brandon Ingram. That's a big factor too. Ultimately, Donnie, I think you're right. I think they give this one more shot with this roster. DeJounte Murray comes back in, I believe, a couple of days. I think he comes back on Wednesday. DeJounte Murray will be back in action. They're going to start getting their guys back. I think they probably give this one more run. But if they get, let's say, to the end of December and this is not improved, they're still sitting the bottom of the Western Conference, I think the decision's made for them, and you've got to explore the trade market.
Yeah, that may very well be the case. So what happens if they get to the point where they explore the market and they're getting what they would consider to be not good enough deals for their guys? Do they just move into the next year?
Yeah, I mean, with Brandon Ingram, you would have to consider well, you're going to lose him, right? As long as right now the Pelicans are determined to not be the team to pay him, at least not big money on his next contract. So maybe BI comes off of that and says, I'll take less. If that offer just doesn't exist. It's part of the reason why he's still a Pelican. He would have been moved over the summer if there were teams out there willing to be the team to pay him his next big contract. That has not been the case, though. So that's been a challenge with trading him. So your worst case with Brandon Ingram would be there's no good offer at the trade deadline. You keep him, and then you either just are rid of the salary and you free up flexibility that way, or you could sign and trade him. Something like that could happen. Or if he really doesn't see an offer that he likes, maybe he re-signs with you for a year. So there's still options, even if they don't move him. But I'm sure the preference would be to not have to deal with the risk of losing him for nothing and to get some kind of assets for him. So you try to make some kind of move before the trade deadline with him. With Zion, because he still has 3 years under contract after this year, yeah, if the right offer isn't there, you can go into the summer with him on your book still and try to make the move then if you decide, hey, we need to move forward. Because there's a pretty good chance that if you're tanking, there's going to be reasons to hold him out. He will be injured in some way that will prevent him from being on the floor and actually helping your team win games.
Yeah, definitely possible. I was just curious about, what their plan is. Like you said, with Brandon, it's kind of like he's basically gone at the end of this year. So that may be a thing. But with Zion, I think you truly do have to hold out until you can get the Godfather offer, whatever that looks like. 1 first, 2 first, 3 first. I have no idea. But there's probably going to be heavy stipulations on whatever package they get, similar to the contract he has, because whatever team gets him is going to be looking at him the same way the Pelicans are. And it's that he is somebody that's amazing, but is never on the court, can't stay healthy, can't play, has weight concerns, things like that. So definitely a interesting player to have.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it'll be fascinating to see what the Pelicans do from here. But everybody, let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. What should the Pels do with Zion Williamson? Is it time now that Zion is splitting from CAA, but the reasoning for splitting is because they didn't get him out of New Orleans and didn't get him to the Knicks, in addition to issues with his contract? Is it time for the Pelicans just to wash their hands of the Zion Williamson business and move on to a new era? Let us know in the comment section, and go check out our latest video. The Wizards have revealed their asking price for Kyle Kuzma. Could be interesting for the NBA's trade market. Go check that one out right now.